All right, awesome. Welcome everybody. This is the Market Hangout, and honestly, I don't. Oh yeah, it's October 7th. All right. With where things currently stand, kind of wanted to go through and get basically a blank, real nice, clean chart with nothing on it, just to go through and kind of highlight some of the things that I would like to see for any kind of trade plan or anything along those lines for today and for this week. So locally, 63,000, 64,000 really is going to be kind of this key area of resistance. So I want to go through and just real quick highlight that. Again, this is kind of tying into this order block that we had gone through and formed. Throughout the day, obviously, we ended up seeing a deviation go through and be formed. And currently, we've seen price go through and pull back. One area that we currently are kind of finding ourselves in locally is we did have this real nice clean area where we had held support multiple times, and then locally during this time down through here we had hit resistance multiple times. But all in all, so far, price is still very much interacting with this. Just because we are a hairline below this does not mean that this level is broken just yet. We would want to see kind of an overall confirmation. But outside of that, short term, one of the next things we can go through and kind of look at is back over here. We had some real nice, clean, basically a very similar order block as well go through and kind of be formed during the top of this. This was kind of a real nice area where we had come through, found some nice, good support, and then eventually came back through and rallied up through here. So short term, as far as some of the things that I'm specifically looking at for this week, is so far we are kind of stuck within this overall range. Outside of that, should we go through and potentially break out towards the upside, this area up through here, basically between the roughly 66,000 almost up to 66.5, this is going to be kind of that next area of confluence that I think would make a lot of sense for price to go through and gravitate towards. Towards the downside, I do think that, even if we were to go through and look at something on the daily, now I'm swapping time frames on this here specifically because I think that it's just important to kind of, sometimes go through and look at things on different time frames. But during this overall pullback, this is really where that on the daily, we have this daily demand zone that comes in through here. And so with that, I just want to make sure that in and of itself is highlighted. And this is something that you can kind of do anytime you see different pullbacks during any kind of thing, especially on something like the daily or the weekly time frame, depending on where things currently stand. You can pretty much generally see very quickly, very easily, where there would be demand zones, where there would be areas people would potentially want to see price action go through, and see how it kind of reacts overall. Now, so far, this daily candle does not look the greatest. This does look like pretty bearish price action, a lot of selling pressure from the $63,000 to $64,000 level. But again, this is the daily time frame. We really need to go through and kind of look at things, on longer term time frames. But when we're talking about day trades and things that we would want to go through and see, this is really where I'd go through and try to highlight some of those things. So, okay, first and foremost, obviously, right now we are kind of testing. Basically, I mean, honestly, this is probably really close to being an approximate midpoint with where things currently stand. Not quite perfect if we're looking at things, but we're really close. Obviously, this is an area that we do have significant price action locally, and so far, that's why I think it's important to go through, and we're going to run with this one because price action is continuing to go through and maintain this. So first and foremost, if price can go through and continue to maintain this level as support, at that point in time, maybe this is the low that we end up going through, potentially, essentially kind of placing our bets on. That as long as it goes through and continues to hold, should price continue to maintain above here, at that point in time, one could go through and look for a long, basically coming back in towards the highs, maybe take some profits along the way, and then, quickly move stops to break even. Again, these are short-term trades. This is not something that I would really look to try and go through and play out for months and months on end, or weeks, or anything like that. These would be very short-term plays, and really kind of going from there, seeing what all goes through and happens. After that, who knows? Maybe price could come back in towards basically testing basically what some of the local highs have been, coming back from towards the tail end of September. And so, going through and looking at something like this, especially just given where things currently stand, I think that this would be a really nice, potentially clean invalidation point with really good, potentially, decent, entry. Now, the biggest thing that I would want to see is, if we were, for instance, were to go through and kind of zoom in on some of the shorter term time frames. Again, you would want to see price continue to go through and maintain this. This would be okay if there was a couple candles closing below here, but you'd want to see price very quickly continue to go through and hold this level as support. Now, honestly, I think it's a little too early to go through and tell. Again, I'd want to see a little bit of structure, but I'd want to not see acceptance below here. Man, that was potentially really quick bought up. Now, if this ends up just going through and rocketing off, from here, like while we're talking about this, I want to make it clear that this would not be something I would chase. It could be potentially a really good scalp play, but this would not be something I would chase. Again, I want to see, for my trading strategy, for things that I like to go through and see, I want to see some form of structure. And again, obviously we are extremely zoomed in here on like a 5-minute time frame. But even if we go out to 15-minute, 30-minute, all of these kind of things, I would want to see a little bit of structure be built, and then I'd want to see kind of a local high that ends up getting established over here, taken out, and then I know exactly where I'm wrong on the trade, whether it be this low, maybe one other low that could potentially be a little bit lower. But either way, as long as price would then be able to maintain above this level at that point in time, I think longs would be really nice and clean for, kind of targeting the upside portion of this range. Let me clean the chart up a little bit. On the flip side, obviously there is then also potentially the bearish setup. So should we end up going through and seeing something along these lines, and say it just goes through and absolutely rips, maybe even takes out this high that we established over here, but price just kind of reversed on everybody really, really fast. Well, one thing that I would want to go through and see for any kind of bearish setup would honestly be something more akin towards this here, where we would see more of a break in the overall trend. So let's say price does go through and rip back up towards the upside, takes out these highs that we had over here, but ultimately we are beginning to kind of form some of this trend that we currently have. And let's say that at that point, yes, price comes up, but ultimately begins breaking the trend, holding the trend as resistance. This would potentially be a decent entry for an aggressive entry with very, very tight stops at the highs. After that, at that point, if you wanted to take more of the conservative entry with a confirmation of the break of the trend, you'd want to see current structure get, basically get broken. Whether that, be basically kind of the overall box, or let's just say you kind of pick, maybe even just the highs from these candles over here, and say as long as price is continuing to maintain below these levels, at that point in time, building a little bit of structure, that would potentially be a pretty decent short setup, basically back towards the lows at that point in time. Again, potentially take targets, profits kind of along the way, be quick to move profits to, quick to move stops to break even and everything. But all in all, I think that we're not necessarily out of the woods. And again, we could also see a very, very quick crash, depending on how Wednesday comes in. If there's some spooky things that are within the FOMC minutes, I think markets would have extreme, extreme volatility at that point in time. And we could potentially see a very, very quick move down towards basically this daily demand zone that we had gone through and we had talked about. Now, after that, I do think that that would probably be a decent area to go through and be looking for longs back towards the upside. But I'd really want to see how price would kind of come into some of these key areas locally with where things currently find. Yeah. So anyhow, those would be kind of the local long and short setups. Obviously, if any fast crash that we get back towards, that we come back up towards, and can go through and reclaim, you'd have a real nice clean play on a deviation style setup, either taking an aggressive entry or waiting for structure to kind of get built, and then take out any high that's established at that point in time. However low we end up potentially going, again, we will always have the trade on the other side of the coin. So don't ever feel like um, you're potentially missing out on something, especially if the market's moving one way. Because more often than not, you will see pullbacks coming towards one way or the other. Basically, a reversion to the norm. And honestly, those are sometimes some of the best trades to go through and take. Obviously, you don't want to trade against the trend, but currently, if we're looking at things from a more zoomed out perspective, the one thing that I think that is just beyond important to go through and look at is, currently we are just in an overall downtrend. This is sloped down. Now that doesn't mean that we can't see Bitcoin go through and potentially come up and tag, basically the top bound of this trend, as it has done numerous times. But it's going to be an area where, I think that a lot of people could potentially be caught off guard, because if it ends up being resistance again, and we end up getting pushed back down lower, even short term, even if it's one of those, yeah, hey, but October we make it up there, maybe towards the end of October, we kind of see a little bit of a pullback. In November is when we finally break out, from here. At that point in time, I think that too many people are so set that October can only be up only, and that is a dangerous way to go through and kind of look at the markets, because the markets will generally go through and humble a lot of people that are dead set in their ways. I've had it happen to me numerous times, and I no longer try to dictate what the market does. I'd rather sit here and react to what the market does, and just try to have game plans depending on what all is going on, locally and long term, so that then when price does a said thing, if any of them go through and line up with what I'm thinking could go through and happen, I know how I'm going to react ahead of time. It's not one of those I'm sitting here gambling, panicking, oh, what do I do? No, if we see a pullback into a daily demand zone, and as long as that goes through and continues to hold, I'm going to look for long setups. Hey, if we end up going through and pumping and we see, more significant resistance back up towards the highs, and hey, it's not looking like we're able to go through and confidently get above and hold these, well then, hey, at that point in time, I can look for shorts back towards the downside, because at the end of the day, all we've done is we're stuck within a range. That's literally all this is. We are just consolidating within a range-bound environment. And so playing the lows, playing the highs, there is nothing wrong with that. It is absolutely okay. Um, Outside of that, should we end up going through and seeing a potential break outside of this range? Again, I've said this a few times now, but basically the $70,000 level, if I can highlight it properly, 69 is close enough. The $70,000 level is going to be key here. Now, the reason this is going to be a key here is because if price, let me zoom out just a little bit. Okay, so if price is unable to take out this high, okay, the reason, if it cannot take out this high over here, we would then still maintain the structures of this being a downtrend. Now, at that point in time, if price ends up coming back through and rallying up towards 70K, and we cannot take out 70K, we cannot get above 70K, this would be viewed as a failed rally. And at that point in time, I think it would be extremely likely that we take out the lows that we ended up establishing back over here. And I know that sounds extremely bearish. I know that sounds extremely scary, and some people might be caught off guard with something like that. But this is one of the primary reasons why I think it's just very important to make sure people are aware of it.
You come in here, you clean the entire living room.
You mean we have to stay in here the whole time until Mom's back?
I take it
Once you come inside,
that's the
once you
Paul
start going
family.
inside, you're gonna do a cleanup.
Paul, you're not on mute.
No worries.
Oh, hey, sorry.
No worries, man. No worries. Um, so all right, all right. I have this stuff all unedited, so you didn't say any sensitive information, so I think you're good. Um, so all right, yeah. So this would be kind of one of those areas where, I think that many people would probably be caught off guard for something like this. On the flip side, let's say price is able to come up through here, and we begin flipping this into support. At that point in time, I think that we'd be obviously testing basically the current all-time high, being right around 74K, and then again look out for those breakout plays. Those would then be moving in towards targeting basically the 76, 80,000, going in towards 95,000, having targets kind of along the way for potentially any of those trades. So, it's not that we can't break out. I don't want to, make it sound like I'm being overly bearish or anything. But again, anything short of $70,000, this rally that we had over here, again, because I believe that we are still in the midst of this rally that we're trying to get back up towards $70,000. Again, we haven't even tested, the trend line, being the overall current downtrend that we've been in. So without even seeing, like, had this potentially come up and we saw a test over here, and then we came down and we started to try and form a lower high structure, and then now we're coming back up through here. That'd be a slightly different talking point, because at that point we would have already tested the trend, failed the trend again. But hey, instead of taking out the low, we would have then established, hey, this could be the beginning of an uptrend. Locally, short term, yeah, we're technically in an uptrend, but in the long term, the multi-month consolidation period, we still remain to be in a downtrend. And especially without the confluence of being able to come up during this time and test that downtrend, I would just say that this currently is just the short-term uptrend within the more multi-month consolidation downtrend that we've gone through and seen. Again, that's not to say that we can't go through and break out, but again, the $70,000 level, this is why it's so critical in my mind, because this was the last high before we went through and we saw the low. We haven't even come up to test the downtrend yet, let alone the $70,000 level that has been there. Outside of that, short-term plays, we went through and kind of walked through some of those. More longer-term plays, again, the $70,000 level, this is what I want to see. Now, if we end up going through short-term, and we come up, and let's just say we tag 67, but we tag the downtrend, and that ends up basically being it. Let's say at that point in time, yeah, hey, maybe we do take out the low, or we potentially put in kind of a double bottom, being, same price level, whatever the case may be. At that point in time, we could go through and look, but then the $67,000 level, the same way that I'm looking at the $70,000 level, that's going to be the level in my mind at that point in time to then say we would need to get above that. We would need to get above 70K, because again, otherwise, again, you take this trend out a little bit further, we'd want to then see a new structure being formed where, yes, hey, we ended up having another lower high over here. So this would then be the high. This would be the high that we would want to see price overcome, and go on from there. Not to say that, 70K and 74K wouldn't be big deals, but for any hope of the larger trend to potentially go through and change, that is why those levels are so important to watch and pay attention to. All right. But I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the recorded section. I'll have this posted and uploaded here in just a little bit. But thanks again, everybody. Yeah, we'll see you on the next one.